Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hello everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It is wonderful to have your company for another episode of the show. Now, before we get on to our guest, I want to share with you a great resource that's coming your way. So if you're a practice owner who's motivated and driven and you want to get more from your practice, whether it's earning a greater income, having more free time, enjoying the journey a bit more, then I want to invite you to an upcoming dental Growth Summit. And that Growth Summit is going to be held over 4 nights and it runs from September the 4th to September the 8th and it's totally free. Over the course of those 4 evening sessions, we're going to be talking about a bunch of things. There's a group of panelists coming along and we're going to be talking about how to grow additional streams of revenue. We're going to be talking about getting your systems and operations right. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and the future of dentistry. We're going to be talking about getting your finances right. We're going to be talking about how to add capacity and grow, getting yourself set up for growth. We're going to be talking about getting your marketing right, getting your legals right, and everything in between. So I'd encourage you that if you're a practice owner and you want to get more from your practice, come along. It's entirely free. As I said, it's 4 nights from September the 5th through to September the 8th. And all you need to do to register is go to practicesuccess.org/dental growth 2022. But now let's get on to our guest. His name is JMReid and someone who I've admired and respected for an incredibly long time. And John is the author of several books. And in fact, one of the books that I've really admired the most is called The 5 Lost Superpowers. It's a great book and our conversation today really revolves around these superpowers, but in particular one of them and as it relates to practice success. So if you want to think about how to overcome adversity, if you want to think about how to get more from your team, if you want to think about how to get ahead with your goals, then John's going to be sharing some great strategies, some wonderful pearls of wisdom that I know will be really helpful for you. So let's get on to our conversation with JMReid. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I enjoyed it. Now, just a quick note before we do get to it though, the audio in this presentation is not what we'd normally hope for, but the content was so good, I just wanted to make sure we got it out to you. So here's JMReid.
JMReid, welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast. We've finally made it. We've had a few false starts, but we've got here. So thank you for your patience, my friend.
Well, it's great to be here. I meant to tell you, I was at the dentist today, of all things. So in advance of this, I went to the dentist just to make sure everything was good.
There we go. Well, hopefully it all went well. John, you're very well regarded in the space of learning development. You've got a lot of background in industry. You've got a lot of background in leadership, learning development, a whole plethora of different things. So really when I sat down to prepare for our conversation, I realized there's probably a bazillion things we could talk about because you've got a really diverse and varied experience. I wanted to just start our conversation by asking you about that diverse and varied experience because I think it's going to help set some frames and some context for some of the conversations to come through. So I wonder if you could just take a moment to share with the audience a bit about your backstory, how you got to this point, and if there's any particular philosophies that you have that kind of have shaped you in any particular way.
Thank you. I started I think what's important is that I'm the youngest of 5. And so that makes me sort of that child who's the youngest of 5 trying to get attention. I went to the University of Maryland and graduated and got hired by Dow Chemical. Now, what's interesting there is I'd never had a chemistry course in my life. And I still struggle between inorganic and organic chemicals. But they hired me because they thought at the time that they could teach people the chemistry they needed, and they were looking for a certain type of personality. And I did very well. And I did very well because, unlike my counterparts who were more technical in experience, I was more curious. And so sales, which is where I started, became very easy for me because it just seemed like you ask questions and you listen. And so that was sort of like, that's what I did. And it worked. And people, you find out people like to talk and they like to talk about themselves and they like when you talk about them. So as long as I was in that lane, I was in pretty good shape. So I worked for a variety of chemical companies. I always moved when I thought I had learned what I could learn in that role. So I was in sales and then product management, then in business management, I had P&L responsibility. And so I went up the ladder with 4 different companies, both small companies and large companies in the chemical industry. I left all that behind. I'm a 3-time cancer survivor. And I reached that moment in my mid-30s, like, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? I mean, I really didn't care about the price of caustic soda. People do, and that's good. And I admire that. And I love the chemical industry. But there was no passion for that. What I did have a passion around was the learning. And I thought people could get better and wanted to get better. And most of the training and development that I went through, I didn't think was very productive. And so that led me on a journey to work for a variety of training companies, first in sales and then in sales management, and ultimately start my own company about 14 years ago now.
You just shared something I didn't know about you. That was the 3 times cancer survivor, and probably not where I anticipated starting our conversation, but I wanted to ask you about how that shaped your outlook and how that shaped your view around, the choices you've made, the decisions you've taken. What impact has that had for you?
I'd like to say you always hope to say, well, it made me realize what's important in life. And I'd like to say that, but I was always kind of that person. I was always very present. I was always very much in the moment. So I didn't become more in the moment than I already was. I didn't think there were other moments that you could have besides the one you're in. So that was tended where I was. I think I became less sort of competitive and less like I have to be the first in line, or less I have to, the small stuff kind of went away to a major degree. And I believe that I learned that, I mean, there was some compassion, which is in the book that we wrote about, the 5 Lost Superpowers. People do need you they don't just want empathy, they want compassion. And conversely, it's changed my view on empathy, as a matter of fact, because I'm not anti-empathy, but I didn't need, when I was going through cancer, people to be empathetic. Tell me they knew what it must be like to be me, or they could feel like, because they couldn't. I was 4 kids, 35 years old. Very few people could relate. What I needed was some action, some compassion. I needed to take my help with my kids or do something active, but to simply use words around that you feel for me, or you can feel like you're me, I think was an overreach. And so I've always been a little jaundiced on empathy and much more pro compassion, which is empathy with action.
You've used a word a couple of times in our conversation already, and that is around learning. And you've also used one of the words, curiosity, a few times as well. So I'm curious to ask about those superpowers, because you said that curiosity in our conversations previously is somewhat of a lost superpower, but it seems to be something you've naturally had, whether it was going through your chemical job and being curious enough to learn how to sell, being curious enough to understand people and what their problems were that you're seeking to solve. I imagine when you went through your health challenges, you became curious about that as well. It sounds like you went on a particular process to understand things itself. So where does curiosity fit into your world? How is it a superpower, and why is it indeed a lost superpower?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the greatest superpower to have. I was lucky. I wasn't burdened by a technical degree or technical knowledge. I think people that have the burden of being a specialist or an expert, and it is a curse in a way, because there's an expectation that you are the specialist and the expert, that you know stuff, and that if you don't know stuff, then it's counter to how you define yourself, which is I'm an expert. Now, if I define myself as a learner, then I got no problem. I just learned that. Look what I learned. That's good. I learned. But if I say I'm an expert, it can be hard to say, look what I learned. Because so I think I benefit from not being technically expert. That helped me a lot at Dow. I think I benefit from really being wrong. In other words, if somebody has an argument that I hadn't thought of and it changes the way I think, I'm like, wow, I was wrong about that. And I like being wrong. I like being wrong because it means I'm learning and that I'm growing. If I'm never wrong, then it means I'm right. And that means that I've been right. And that means I'm not letting any new information in. So for a long time, in 8th grade, I love this story, but nobody loves it. And I don't know if your listeners will love it. But in 8th grade, we had to do Romeo and Juliet, like all 8th graders in Montgomery County, Maryland. And we had to write about the situation as sort of the most eventful situation. And for your listeners, it was like Tybalt and Mercutio. They fought. And I think, Mercutio dies. So everybody wrote about that in the class. And I wrote, and this is a true story. Like 25 out of 26 kids wrote that, Tybalt was angry and Tybalt's aggressiveness, and Tybalt was a fighter and he caused all this thing to happen. One kid who got the A, and the teacher pointed it out, wrote about Tybalt's love of family. So he took the same data set that I did, and he reached a completely different conclusion that was equally defendable. And that was really a milestone in my life, because it was like, wow, I looked at something, had a point of view, thought I was right. 25 other people thought I was right. This one person saw it differently. They're not wrong. They just see it differently. And so it's always been like, I'm just a person with a perspective. I have a perspective about a lot of things. Do I think I'm right? Sure. That's where my perspective comes from. But I'm not, I have an answer, not the answer. I'm not a zealot. I could be wrong. And I'm more than willing to listen to a different point of view, because there's probably something there I can learn.
Wow, we're getting into a topic that I love to talk about. It's very philosophical. You're speaking about something that I feel very strongly about, and that is attachment to being right. And that seems to be, we're living in a world at the moment where that seems to be rampant. I'm right, you're wrong, they're good, they're bad. All of that kind of A or B choice, very binary kind of existence. Probably this is going to sound very counterintuitive. I use social media for work. The day that I stop working will be the day that I probably deactivate all my social media accounts, because I feel like that's a pond for that kind of I'm right, they're wrong kind of world. But
it is.
But I'm wondering, do you see this attachment to being right as becoming more prevalent? Or is it just something that you're noticing more? I certainly am noticing more. I don't know if it's more prevalent, I don't know if I'm just noticing it more. I'm curious if you're feeling that.
The availability bias. We see it. We got all that stuff, and we go, it's happening a lot more. No, I think the human I'm a much more even keel that the human condition has always been the human condition. Yeah. And that 200, 500, 600 years ago, people be like, everybody thinks they're right and everything's wrong. I don't think there's nothing new under the sun to speak of. Now, technology accelerates it. It makes it worse. There's all kinds of things like that but the idea that people form an opinion and form a belief on that opinion and think they're right and others are wrong, that's been around since time immemorial. And the idea that they hang around people who agree with them and, we become us and they become them, that's been around forever, for millennial. I mean, this is nothing new. It's in our face so much more. And leaders who maybe in the past would try to come to the middle have decided, no, there's this to their benefit to go to the extremes. So they haven't helped the situation.
So if it's been around forever, and I agree with you, I think you're right. I think what technology has done is put a spotlight on it and maybe kind of served it up to us a bit more regularly than what we're used to.
Yes.
If we're going to have success in any endeavor, and of course we have to define what success means for each of us, whether it's in our business life, in our personal life. My personal view is how successful we are in one or others of our life is going to be correlated to how we make decisions.
Absolutely. You are the result of your decisions, right? Your legacy is the sum of all your decisions.
So therefore, I want to understand where curiosity fits into decisions, perspective fits into decisions, and where this binaryism of I'm right, they're wrong, or this is good, this is bad, how all of those things kind of come together.
Ugh.
Yeah, well, I know, in a hot mess, right? Yes. And how we can be perhaps be a little more thoughtful in our decision making, because this is kind of where I see this all heading, is how well we make decisions impacts our outcomes.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. Whether you're a behavioral scientist and you go the thinking fast and slow, which talks about intuition and gut and how we were biased for shortcuts. And so we're constantly taking shortcuts when we shouldn't be. Not appreciating the complexity, or you go the neuroscience and you go the two routes that decision-making can go. And I'm going to botch this a little bit, but there's a transactional route, which is sort of on habits and what feels right in the moment and what feels good and what gets me out of that. And then there's this more strategic executive center gets involved and sort of weighs the options, but that's more cognitive load. It's more exhausting. And when do I slow myself? Both of those things have in common, whether neuroscience or behavioral. The key thing is to slow oneself down and realize that you're in a cognitive minefield, or this decision is not what it appears to be, right? But they are related. And once you realize I mean, there's so much nonsense out there that people have to listen to. Like, you go with your gut. No, don't go with your gut. For God's sake, what kind of advice is that? Your gut's wildly unreliable. I mean, it's just wildly unreliable. You feel like it's reliable because even if you do something wrong, you tell yourself, yeah, that's what you meant to do anyway, or you knew that was going to happen, right? We have that. Yeah, I knew it was going to work, but I thought it was worth trying. No, you didn't. The hindsight bias. Right? The hindsight that even when we're wrong, we tell ourselves we're right. It's a crime. Curiosity fits in because all throughout that process, you should be curious. You should be less in love with what you know and more in love with what you don't know. Mm-hmm. People tend to fall in love with what they know. Well, here's all the things I know. Yeah, but who cares? You know that. What's the stuff you don't know that you wish you knew? And asking really good questions of yourself and others. There's a thing around, what makes for a good question. I had a client, big client, global client, and they had this big thing on, better questions. And so I actually asked them, so what's a better question? And they're like, oh, no. The better questions, better answers. I'm like, yeah, okay, but what's the better question?
What's the better question? Yeah.
Well, the better question is a question that makes the other person think, speculate, evaluate, that really deepens the conversation. So asking you, hey, Jesse, how's your business going? It's open-ended, but Jesse doesn't have to think. Nah. It's going great. That's going down. It's up. It's down. But if I said, hey, Jesse, 5 years from now, if the business continues to operate as it is, where do you see it? He's going to go, okay, it's 5 years from now. Where do I see it? And now he's got to do some thinking. So there's techniques. So this idea of curiosity, there are clearly techniques you can learn to get better answers and to have people think and have more robust conversations. But we tend to go to the safe questions, the questions we want to ask, sometimes even the stuff that confirms what we already believe.
The person who I think needs to be asked better questions is usually me. So I need to ask better questions of myself, in the sense that sometimes I find that when I'm going through my own planning or decision-making processes, I'm better at asking better questions of others than I am of myself, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if that's a thing or if that's just a Jesse Green foible.
No, I think it is a thing. One thing that fascinates me, I just discovered about myself, so I'll share that with the learners. We have these values for my company, and it's like, have a perspective, share your insight, and all this good stuff. It's all good. And I'm the leader of the company. But what happens is, somebody who works for me says, well, why are we doing it that way? And there's still part of me that's like, I'm the boss, and who are you to ask? Now, I'm conscious of that thought, right? That's It's not me. It's not my aspiration. And I'm conscious of that's a strategic moment. That's the moment either I live my values or I don't live the values. And so I shared this. I said, so much as what people put on walls or espouse they're about, there's a handful of moments. And maybe you don't want to explain your thinking to your subordinates. You're tired. And I can't believe we did that piece of business. What were you thinking? And they want to know. And you want to say, to hell with you. But you're like, no, I got to create a culture where that question gets answered and that question is respected. Yes. And that helps me get better because they're challenging me to some degree, challenging my thinking, and can I make the argument? Or how solid was this choice I made? So you end up better for it, but it is interesting as I've gone through my career. Again, it's a handful of moments that matter. Living your values, being trustworthy is 95% of the time a breeze. It's a walk in the park. It's like 5% of the time, was I honest? Did I speak the truth? Did I rise to the occasion? And, sometimes you will, sometimes you won't, but being conscious of those moments, I think is critical. And reflecting, which is also part of curiosity, right? What did I do there? What could I have done differently? How would I do it differently?
You do a lot of work in the leadership space, and obviously, part of leadership is helping people become their best selves.
Right.
So obviously, that involves some curiosity about what that looks like, what that entails for the individual, for the company, and so on and so forth. I wanted to ask you about where curiosity intersects with learning and development. Formal learning and formal development is what I'm getting at, other than just a thought process. For the people listening to this podcast, most of them are dental practice owners. Most of them are thinking about, well, how do I help my practice become the best it can be, whatever that may be. So there's an element of needing to work with and through people to achieve those objectives. So we've got some values fit we want to achieve, and as you said, a lot of values sit on the wall and don't do anything.
Right.
but equally there's some skills that need to be developed as well. So how do we incorporate all that we've spoken about so far? So we're training hard skills as well as creating people that have a perspective.
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to come around to it, so a couple things. Most training and development that I'm aware of is based on that learners are bad and we're trying to get them to good.
Yeah.
That they're either empty vessels that need to be filled or they're doing something wrong that we need to fix.
Yeah.
And the fix is some model or some methodology or some process that somebody came up with and wrote a book about typically.
Yeah.
And that book could have been written, believe it or not, in 1970, 1980, 1990. It's been around for 20, 30 years, but it's still the right answer for this guy today or this woman today for this issue, right? I mean, it's somehow magically, it's designed just for you. So the whole foundation of training and development it's a little shaky ground to think that it's going to work for this person today in Australia or something that was created 25 years ago. And so what does work? Well, and the sad thing is the industry knows what works. There's a lot of research on adult learning. So it's not like, wow, just if we knew what the theory was and how to get people to learn, we all know it. It's just hard to do it. And it's not necessarily scalable as they would like. And you have to do much more customization than they want. And so the margins get squeezed. And so their intent is good and they believe in their stuff. The problem is they believe they have the answer. They believe there's only one model. There's only one way. And so that gets problematic. For adults who are good, going to great, which is most people, middle to high performers, or even great and want to get better, most of the training isn't designed for them. So then you got to say, well, how do you design it for them, right? Why isn't it designed? And what do they need to do? I'm getting to your question now. It's got to be faster paced. It's got to get the wisdom in the room. You know, you've been running a dentistry practice for, let's say I had 10 people in the room and they're, you guys, how many years have you been running a practice? So they've got me 200 years of practice. How many years do I have? 0.
Yeah.
So, there's got to be wisdom in the room we can pull out rather than the sage on the stage or I'm the smart one. Now, what I bring to the table, of course, is I get to look at leadership all the time. And I get to design stuff. And what gets undervalued way too much is design. Design is the secret sauce, not the models and the content. People are always, what's your content? I'm like, who cares? I mean, it's fine. I got a good model. You should be asking me, how do you engage middle to high performers in a discussion and get their behavior to change? That's the problem we're trying to solve for. The way you do that is you put them in scenarios pretty quickly where they make a choice. And the choice they can make the right choice or they can make a less right choice. But there's a choice they make. And then you explore that choice and how that choice plays out. I can give you a number of examples. I'll give you one here. We're really well known for this accountability exercise, which I designed because a lot of stuff I design, I think, okay, everybody thinks they know accountability. Everybody thinks they're accountable. So there's got to be a fun thing to teach. Go in a room of 25 adults and say, I'm here to teach you about accountability. How insulting is that? These are people that all think they're accountable.
Yeah.
But they're not. The organization has an accountability issue. What they have is a definition issue of what accountability is. So how do you get them there? Well, we throw people immediately into activity. It's an unfolding origami thing where they're given a scenario at the beginning, basically that the thing was not done by this date, and you rate the person. And so people rate that person. On 1 to 5 scale, they'll say 1 because it's not done. And then they unfold it and you give them more information. And the next 6 pieces of information, frankly, are all excuses. They're all distractions. But what you have is you'll have a group of 20 leaders in a room and you map out their scoring. And by the end, where they had at the beginning, maybe 20 people scored this person a 1. Now I've only got 2 people who scored a 1. I've got people scoring them a 2, a 3, and even a 4. Exceeds expectations. And so you go, wow, what's the problem here? And the adults in the room go, well, 20 adults working for the same company, this isn't good. So if I work for you, I'm a 4. If I work for you, I'm a 1. So let's talk about what happened. And you ask people why they moved, and they say things like, well, it was the first time they've ever done it. They really worked hard. So, you make that list in the classroom, and then you say, what should we call this list? And they go, excuses. And the light bulb goes off. And you even get into the conversation, when you make this person a 4, who are you really doing that for? And they come to the conclusion, I'm probably doing it for myself. You're overrating people to make your life easier. You, a person who says, I have great integrity, people should treat people honestly, should tell people the truth. but people aren't conscious of those trade-offs, and nobody's doing it in a way that's safe, but yet challenging. Instead what you get is, let's talk about 5 levels of accountability. At level 1, you have this. At level 2, you have this. And now think about a person you work with and how you get this mishy-mash. We're not going to have the real conversation in the room. The real conversation in the room is, we don't have an alignment on accountability. We all think we're accountable, and that's a problem because we're not. We don't. We're weighing other things, intentions and effort, and all kinds of things.
We spoke about problems with definitions.
Yes.
Where else does that show up? How does that manifest? We've used it in this particular example, but it seems to me that part of the basis of any miscommunication is going to be operating from different definitions of what we think we're on the same page, but we're not. So
no, yeah.
How do we get so wildly different definitions of something that seems so universally accepted?
Yes, first of all, strategic thinking, executive presence. I could go on and on in my industry and tell you that the problem is, one of the problems is there's no shared definition. So what are we doing here?
Yeah.
But moving beyond that, one great question to ask leaders, and this will be helpful to your audience, is that, because I coach leaders, and I'm saying, do you want to be heard or do you want to be understood? Because most of the time they're acting like they want to be heard.
Yes.
Now they'll say, I want to be understood. I'm like, well, if you want to be understood, that means it's two-way. That means they can ask questions. That means it's safe to ask. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into two-way. One way is appealing because it's in control. There's no noise. You feel like you've done something. But there's that issue. The other issue that's fascinating for communication, and I had a guy I coach who's very successful, but I said to him, he's a very nice guy. Very nice. One of the nicest leaders you'd ever meet. I said, your problem is going to be eat the oatmeal or like the oatmeal. And he said, what do you mean? I said, you're going to get a bunch of people in the room and you're going to waste their time for an hour trying to get them to like oatmeal. And at the end, you're going to let them know that, well, whether they like it or not, they got to eat it. And they're going to want to know why you wasted an hour of their time.
Yeah.
Because if I got to eat the oatmeal, what was that all about? But your intent is, I want them to feel good. I want them to be engaged. And I want them to know I care about them. But you're going to, create dissatisfaction, disengagement.
I guess he's wanting them to want to eat the oatmeal rather than him having to tell them to eat the oatmeal.
Right. And he's wanting them to like it too.
Yeah.
So I not only want to eat it, but I want you to like eating it. Well, some people are never going to like it.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't have a choice anyway. So why are you wasting my time?
Yeah.
And so for a lot of leaders that I work with, they just have never explored, they've never been allowed to explore the tension between my intent and the reality. I want to be a facilitated leader who listens to my people, but I also am the boss. And so they're just never there's not a space where we can explore that and say, okay, what's the underlying belief system you have to be effective?
Oh, wow. There's a big topic right there.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you a quick one more thing to think about because it applies to your group. And we have this cool activity that I designed. It was based on the real world. Somebody told me this situation where somebody had called in and the exec admin had given away all the company secrets. It's a true story. They had given the names and addresses of all the leaders to this person who called in and represented themselves as the new head of marketing. And my reaction to that was, oh my gosh, what an idiot. This person should be fired. How inept. And fortunately, the person said to me, no, John, think about it. That behavior made sense to her. So there's something about the system she's working in. And of course, everything happens in a system. And we do have this attractiveness to try to find the individual and blame them when we should step back and look. So what processes, what is our culture? What, why do people not tell me what's going on? What about me as a leader created that versus, I can't believe they didn't tell me.
Dentists by nature or by nurture maybe, but I suspect most of us have this inbuilt in our DNA. If we're going to use cliches, type A personalities, that they're pretty precise.
Right.
They've been schooled academically, so they're right most of the time. They're used to being right because they score well on their examinations. They go into a business ownership arena where all of a sudden they're now dealing with all this shades of grey and murkiness and nothing's right or wrong, nothing's in between the lines. It's all kind of spilling everywhere because it's messy, right? And so we've had 20 odd years or more of being right, being in control, being told how smart we are, getting the correct answer, all of that stuff, all those patterns of, the old story that neurons that fire together, wire together, all that sort of stuff, those patterns of thought are well ingrained. Leadership, to do it well, or at least one perspective of doing it well, to make sure I'm thinking of perspective, is about creating that tension where you may not be right, being okay that someone else may have a perspective that's equally valid. And yet, I'm thinking of myself in this as well, because I've had similar situations. The tendency to tell, the tendency to direct, the tendency to kind of shut down perspectives because they don't align perfectly with mine, or others.
Yeah.
Has been there. And I like to think I've improved as a leader. I hope I have over the years, but certainly in my younger years as a dentist, I fell into every possible trap.
Oh. Yeah, me too when I was young as a leader. Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah. And so I want to talk to those people that go, well, this sounds great, John, but dude, I like things my way. I like things. I like things done a particular way. And if you're going to eat oatmeal, eat the oatmeal, smile, enjoy it, and wolf it down, and don't say a word about it, kind of thing, right? So, what's the transition?
The first things first. I mean, first you have to decide what you want to be about.
Yeah,
and I don't have the answer for that.
No.
If you want to be, I'm going to be an expert. That's how I want 3 words to define me. Will be expert, smart, and driven, then you're going to behave that way, and you get that outcome, and that's the choices you've made. If you say, no, I really want to be more collaborative and supportive of my people and, bring out the best in them, then that's a different. So you've got to define your, and I don't like the word brand at all, but what are the 3 or 4 things I'm about? You only give you 3 or 4 because otherwise they start coming in conflict. You can't be 9 because they all start bumping into each other.
Yeah.
So you got to pick 3 or things and say, and what I'm about gets driven a lot by, what I'm trying to do. What's my strategy? Certain strategies require different things I might be about. So if I want to do fast growth, entrepreneurial, then I'm going to have to let new ideas in to let that happen. If I want to be financially secure and stable, then that's more command and control. So you can start to, sort out, what am I trying to do here? And what am I about? And I think that's what you do. You say, I'm in a learning and development organization, and what I'm about is, curiosity, fun, smart. I like to be considered smart, so that's important to me, but it should be fun. And we should be constant. So I think once you have those 3, it does become easier because then you can assess yourself every day. Did I model that in that moment? Was I what I said I'm about? Because that's the fundamental essence of integrity. Integrity meaning whole, right? That I'm solid. And people say you don't have integrity. People all get shocked. But if you say you're about one thing and do another, you do not have integrity in that moment. You just don't.
So sometimes, do you think there's a tension that arises between what we want to be about and what we are about?
Oh, absolutely. Well, there's a couple things. I mean, we're notoriously bad at self-assessment. So self-assessments are almost worthless, frankly. We like them because we like to get the feedback and read about ourselves, and we think that's us and we think that's cool. But self-assessments are notoriously inaccurate. Yeah, it's hard, right? And we have the overconfidence bias. And, we're great at justifying. Like, I'm sure, I've had this with participants. Well, in that situation, I wouldn't have done it that way. It's like, yeah, you would have. You just did it here.
Yeah.
Normally, I wouldn't do that. Why not? I had one guy once say, I would never do that. I'm like, well, you just did it here. He goes, well, this is just a training exercise. And I said, so you want me to believe that you decided at the beginning of this exercise you weren't going to be you? So I said, so who are you being? Who did you decide to act like? Guy hated me. But that is the question. Don't tell me you just decided to be a different person than you normally are, and therefore your behavior today wasn't you. That's crazy.
I was at a workshop years ago, and I'm a bit of a believer that how we play games is how we play life as well. How you show up in one area.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So we had this game we had to play, right? And it was a guy that was in our group, and he was an infusion salt expert, right? And the CRM. And at that particular point, he didn't know this, right? But I was looking at which CRM to use. I was looking at, whatever. And we did this game, and it was one of those games of trust where everyone kind of played nicely. Everyone kind of got a share of the prize in this particular game. Or, one person could basically take the pot and run, basically. I can't remember the exact name.
Classic.
Anyway, everyone went around. Yep, I'll share. He got to the end and said, nah, thanks, it's mine, and took it all. Right. He thought it was hilariously funny. He thought it was the funniest joke on the planet. There was a few of us in the group who had, myself included, who had this visceral emotional reaction to having just been shafted, basically.
Yeah, right.
And yes, it was in the construct of a game. But what that guy didn't realize out of that is I was not the only one looking for a CRM solution at that point. And he did himself out of at least $20,000 worth of business just because he showed up in that way in a game. And it was really curious because we formed a view. I formed a view and I confirmed with this other person. Now, whether this is right or not, but at the time we formed the view that if he's going to shaft us here, where else is he going to shaft us?
Yeah, no, it's wherever you go, there you are. And, what's interesting about some research is like people, not that he has low ethics, but, people with low ethics think other people have low ethics. So what you find is people like that who laugh and they come, and you would have done it if you had the chance. They actually think that. They actually think, hey, if you had a chance to take advantage of other people, you would have done it. You're just mad because, I did it first. And you're like, no, it's wrong.
It was the wrong thing to, and each of us had that chance, and each of us on that opportunity, right?
Oh, I got it. So it's So I'm sure he would say, "Oh, if you were me and the last one to go, you would have done what I did."
Yeah. How set is that in the sense of our identity? Can that be changed pretty easily? Do we just go, what, I was this and I want to be that? Is it something that you believe that we are who we are, and we've just got to kind of understand that and be okay with it? Or is there a transition and change that can be made if you go, I was a command and control kind of guy, but now I want to be more of the entrepreneurial kind of guy?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, it's a little nature nurture. It's a little, first of all, people can change. And, we can make a choice about how we want to show up. The ease, we have a personality. We have, there's social styles. There are some things that have, there's personality assessment stuff. Some of that's, how you're wired, and there's stuff about how you like to do stuff. So there's a lot of stuff out there that is you. But when it comes to things like, do I want to be open and honest with people? Is that really important to me? Then you can make that choice in any of the styles, right? And define that for yourself. So I don't think it's limiting, and I think you can change it. I think that the hard thing to do for your audience, and I started this by saying technical people, if you're rewarded for being smart, if you're rewarded for having the answers, if you start to view yourself that way, I mean, the famous research on fixed and growth mindset is where, because they had the famous study that I read was they had the kids do the puzzles in like 5th grade in New York City. And one group was told, great job, you're really smart. And one group was told, great job, you really worked hard. And then they asked the kids, who were told they were smart, do you want an easier, a harder one, or the same one? And they wanted the same one because they want to be told they're smart. And they asked the kids who worked hard, do you want a harder one or the same one? They said, we want a harder one. So, and then they could see videos of people who did it faster than them or worse than them. And the smart kids wanted to watch people do it worse than them. Because all of a sudden being smart and defining myself as smart is how I view myself. And I need to maintain that. And so that's, letting that go and being smart and being prideful. And I know a lot about dentistry. I know a lot about this. When it comes to this, I am really smart. But when it comes to running a business, I'm a novice. And that's okay. Because my smart about this isn't going to help me here. What's going to help me here is being curious and learning again and have that learner's mindset. But if I can't see myself as a learner or being vulnerable or saying I don't know something, then you're dead man walking.
Obviously, as dentists, most of us have been rewarded for being smart most of our lives.
Sure. Makes sense. And by the way, I want a smart dentist. I'm not advocating for a non-smart dentist.
No. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with being smart, right?
Yeah, right. No, it's good.
It's a good thing, right? So we're not questioning that. But I guess what I'm hearing you say is having that presence of mind or the self-awareness to understand that I might be smart in one field and that doesn't translate to another. And as I move into another, perhaps I can consciously move into curiosity rather than assuming that I know because I know that over there.
That's all. That is self-identity. One of my favorite quotes comes from a guy named Lev Vygotsky. It's related to this. Lev Vygotsky was the Mozart of child psychology. And he wrote that because he died young. That's why he's the Mozart of child psychology. But he noticed that kids on the playground played a head taller than their age. So an 8-year-old would play like an 11-year-old, or a 6-year-old would play like a 9-year-old. So because they would take risk.
Yeah.
And they would, and then, as we become adults, we start playing ahead shorter. We don't take risks. We want to look smart. We want to look good. Don't want to say we don't know something. We don't want to just, let's see what happens, right? We want to control. And so, part of the magic lies in this idea of being curious, being playful, being vulnerable, and saying, yeah, I don't know this, but we're going to figure this out together. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah, I think it would. You're the author of a couple of books, and I just want to make sure we talk about particularly the 5 lost superpowers. And obviously, you're author of another book called Moving from Models to Mindsets, Rethinking the Sales Conversation. We've touched on curiosity a fair bit. Can we just round out our conversation
Sure.
by discussing the other superpowers? Because I think that'll put a nice bow around that.
Thank you. And I had 3 other authors, so Karina Chase, Lene Steinhagen, and Andrew Reid. What happened was curiosity. I'm a big fan of curiosity and teaching good questioning and all that stuff. And I was writing the first book. I actually said I had the idea of 5 lost superpowers, and I was like, oh, that's a much better book to write. I wish I could write that book. It's just more fun. And then there was this debate. So what are they? How do you know there's 5? Are there 5? What are the 5? And so we really had to figure out, okay, are there 5 independent ones that we can validate with research and are interesting for a reader? And so we came up with the 5, starting with curiosity, then moving into, I'm probably not going to give them the right order in the book, resilience, kids being resilient and getting through difficult times. And for most of these things, well, curiosity clearly. So there's curiosity, resilience, authenticity, compassion, and then playfulness, which also includes like innovation, creativity. For curiosity, authenticity, and playfulness, it's probably the biggest culprit. What gets us is growing up in the school system and the messages, curiosity killed the cat. And you get rewarded for answers, and we don't have time for questions, and there's all kinds of socialization against curiosity going through the school system, as there is for being authentic. You need to conform, you need to dress like this, you need to sit like this, you need to stand like this. I mean, conformity is the order of the day, not authenticity and individuality. And then playfulness, again, it's sort of like, put away childish things, and you're an adult now and you're not a child anymore. And so the idea of play is routinely sort of suppressed. Resilience is not suppressed so much as we just lose our ability to bounce back because of the pressures of the world and sort of being mired in the moment. Compassion is interesting because kids are compassionate. Somebody gets beat up, they all run around to help him. Are you okay? Are you okay? And we suffer from the bystander effect. Like, I don't want to get involved, because all of a sudden we're very wary of the risk of involvement. And we're also much more wired for us versus them. If they need help, well, that's their fault and that's what they deserve. And they had it coming anyway. And if they'd made different choices, they wouldn't be there. If one of us gets in trouble, we're like, oh, we got to help them out. I mean, my gosh, it's one of us. And, us doesn't deserve that. So the us them thing really gets us for compassion. But those are the 5. For the most part, almost across all 5, there is a thing about being present, being in the moment. There's a new phrase I just read today called savoring, like savoring the moment. Like being present is a big solution to all of our problems. If we can just be in the here and now and in the moment. We are social beings, and so the idea of getting a group together and working on things together should come naturally. Again, as I started with this with you, I just think falling in love with the idea that you just have a perspective, that you're not right or wrong. That was my real epiphany, and that happened probably in my 40s, when I just one day said, I'm just a guy with a perspective. It was so liberating. It's so hard. It's such a drain to be right and have to tell people you're right and have to make them feel less than, or fix them or correct them or create hostility with them, versus just say that you got a perspective. I think it's crazy, but at least you got one.
And without having to feel like you've got to constantly justify being right as well. You can say, this is my perspective. I don't have to kind of sit and give you a verse on why I'm right. I can say, this is my perspective, and be cool with it, right?
Yeah, nobody's point of view came directly from God to them. And if they did, we probably think, oh, they're nuts.
Yeah.
But, well, God told me, so therefore I am right.
Yeah.
I mean, most of it's just we've looked at information, we've been in all these factors lead to a conclusion that we feel good about. But we also have to feel good that that's all it is.
Yeah.
And you have to let new data in.
John, I feel like I could talk to you about this for days and days and days.
It's fun. It's a fun topic. We should do another one.
Topic. Look, here's the thing that I really like about conversing with you, because this is ladies and gents, when we started our conversation, I said to John, I really just want to have a conversation. I don't have 20 questions. It's not 20 questions with JMReid today. And the reason I don't like to do that is because I think the value in a conversation like this with you, John, is it's almost like that expression is the music is what happens between the notes. It's the unstructured pieces that come. And I've found this conversation with you to be incredibly valuable because it's challenged me to think.
Can I give you one thing for your listeners? Because I think it's beautiful that what you just said. And one secret sauce that people have lost is the art of conversation. Like we go in with an agenda. We go in with what we want to talk about. I got to ask these questions to you. This is not a conversation. This is an interrogation, an interview, whatever the hell it is, a discussion, but it's not a conversation. And falling in love with just, before we get into it, so how are you doing today? And how was your weekend? And having a conversation with another human being, oh my God, it goes so far to building trust, building rapport, just the environment people feel they're working in.
Yeah, and look, and sometimes I find that, we're fed a staple of, the 3 instant hacks for this and the 7 surefire secrets to that. Oh. And I just don't think life was as neatly packaged as that. And, it would be nice if it were, perhaps. But, John, I feel like part of the missing ingredient for business ownership is doing the thinking.
Yes.
And creating a space to do the thinking and to be okay with not knowing and to sit in that discomfort for a while and to know that there's 100 ways or more to be right. It's just your way that you choose to do things. And that's why I've enjoyed this conversation so much. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, invite me back at any time because you're a delight to talk with as well, and I've got more to say.
I've got, as I said, I could keep going, but I'm looking at you in New Jersey there. I'm seeing the sun or the lights go down around you, descending into darkness. It is dark. So it's probably getting close to, I don't know, is it nearly midnight there?
No, it's 8:30, but yeah.
8:30, all right. Yeah. All right. John, thank you so much for taking the time on our podcast. Now, for listeners, if you want to find out more about John, and please do, because I think this is really important. I don't think that running a business is a paint-by-numbers exercise. So please do get a copy of John's books, the 5 Law Superpowers, moving from models to mindsets, rethinking the sales conversation. You can find John at JMReidgroup.com. Or you can find them on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. Anywhere else where people could find you, John?
No, that's great, though. And I'm happy to. I did one of these once, and the person emailed me and said, what were the other lost superpowers that didn't get in the book? And I was just so thrilled that somebody was curious that read the book and then was speared to email me and want to know. So I was happy to answer that question.
So, ladies and gents, let's hope that this has provoked a few curious thoughts for you. And if people want to email you a curious thought, John, what's the best email address for them to reach you?
Yeah, it's John at JMReidgroup.com. And it's REID. So it's John at JMReid group.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, great. So, ladies and gents, I hope you do think about these things because it's, I think, where the juice is. So, again, John, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. And let's do this again soon. I really mean it because I could talk to you for days on end.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. For more episodes, go to drjessiegreen.com/savvydentist. And to discover how to build a high-performance dental practice, visit drjessiegreen.com and download the free report.